London and Toronto listed Solgold is an exploration company with interests in copper and gold. It has as its flagship asset a greenfield copper gold project in Ecuador. Two of its largest shareholders are well known top tier mining companies, BHP Billiton and Newcrest, each with 14%. Nick Mather is chief executive. He's also a big shareholder in the company with 4.7%. Nick, good to talk to you. Thanks indeed for your time. I know you're a very busy man. This is a company on the move and lots of exciting things happening around Solgold at the moment. I want to get back to basics if I can and ask you, why copper? What is it that's in copper that you see as a big future for Solgold?
Thanks, Jeremy. Copper is one of those metals that the world has a growing and inexorable need for as civilization develops. It's not until you get to around $4 a pound that copper becomes too expensive and can be replaced by aluminium. We'd be like pigs in mud with copper at $4 a pound. So copper has massive upside as the world electrifies. More and more, the non-urbanized countries are going through the process of urbanization that requires lots of copper wire to electrify them for telecommunication systems, for air conditioning, for electric supply for transport systems. And the growth in demand for copper is going to continue. And as soon as COVID is under control, and it will become under control, the demand for copper will, in our view, explode again, and the world will be in short supply of it. We've seen declining reserve and resource figures, declining grades and declining concentrate quality from some of the major South American producers. So the high quality concentrates that we see coming out of Alpala are certainly going to be very strongly demanded by the world's traders.
This leads in very nicely actually into the next question. I was going to say, why Ecuador? You talk about Alpala. We can talk a little bit more detail about that. But I want to talk about Ecuador, really. Why there particularly? What is it about this asset that's so good?
Jeremy, the Solgold skill base was founded in Solomon Islands, where we went looking for copper gold porphyry systems, because these things are so enormous that once you get onto them, it becomes a geometric progression to prove them up. There's some geological peculiarities about Solomon Islands, which meant that yes, we had big systems, but grades weren't much good. On the eastern side of the Pacific, however, the geological characteristics, which I won't bore you all by going into, but it dictates that you get richer ore bodies, and they're very strongly endowed with gold, particularly in Ecuador. And we saw Chile there, where the ground has been largely picked over and very closely held. It was going to be too hard to get into Chile. Peru was too dangerous for us and pretty crowded as well. Colombia was too dangerous as well. And we saw Ecuador there, a 700-kilometre long strike length of 3 parallel metallogenic provinces that had been barely touched. So if you superimpose that geography and geology over northern Chile, you'd cover 25% of the world's copper resources and production. And that's declining now. And it provided Solgold with the opportunity to not just pick up one project in Alpala, but to pick up a whole province. And some of the world's great mining companies have been built on provincial footprints. So, Rio and BHP and iron ore in the Pilbara, Fortescue in the Pilbara. Lots of large copper companies in the porphyry provinces in the southwestern US. So Solgold grabbed that first mover advantage in porphyry exploration and discovery in Ecuador in 2014, and we pegged a great many projects. 20 licenses still to be granted when the new cadastre opens up, and that's imminent, we believe, in Ecuador. And it gives us a footprint of in excess of 3,600 square kilometres, which is unparalleled by any explorer in Ecuador. We're the largest groundholder, we're the largest and most active explorer in terms of greenfield exploration sites. So we have, as a result of putting our foot on this vast province of basically unexplored copper gold porphyry prospectivity, the opportunity to create an entire mining company that successive developments will be funded by the great profitability of the first one, which will be Alpala.
Yeah.
And the very spiky cash flow profile that we have modelled for Alpala is really a function of the quite peculiar geology that we see in Ecuador, where you have the Andean copper belt bent in a number of locations as a result of what we call transcurrent faults. That has opened up the structuring, allowed big porphyry systems to be introduced into the upper levels of the crust, and they're very gold rich as a result of the slow speed with which they've evolved. So there's some complex geological rationale behind there. But the important thing from Solgold's point of view is that we saw Ecuador as the opportunity to peg an entire province, and as a result, we now have what is clearly the envy of most of the world's copper gold porphyry miners.
Yeah, my understanding is that with this funding, I think the Franco, the funding that they're putting in, I think this is their first move into Ecuador, isn't it? So clearly they see something in this as well. Why have you gone down this royalty route for funding your next stage?
The preliminary economic advice or preliminary economic analysis showed a net present value which ranged between 2.6 and 7 billion, depending on what copper and gold price and OPEX and CAPEX assumptions you made. At current copper and gold prices, we think the NPV will be somewhere around the mid-range there, somewhere around 3 billion, and that is around about 5 to 6 times our current market capitalisation. The price to shareholders, or the cost to shareholders, of raising money through issuing corporate equity is therefore very, very great, because we're doing it at a huge discount to the project value. On the other hand, the Franco royalty values the project at around about that $3 billion level, and that's why we think that it's much better opportunity for funding for this project. So we're getting funding into the project on the basis of the project value rather than the market cap of the company. It's non-dilutive, and it makes very little difference to the net present value of the project at the front end. Having a company of the reputation and the size and the knowledge and experience of Franco, obviously investing money on the back of the project value is very reassuring to the board and management, and we hope shareholders and the broader investment market.
Pre-feasibility study coming later this year, and the DFS in 2021. We'll find an awful lot more about the project. But is it Solgold's intention to continue through with production, or is this an asset that ultimately you will sell on and avoid the long-term commitment to producing copper?
As the custodians of the shareholders' capital, we're obligated to and very interested in. I'm a significant shareholder myself, to extracting the best value out of this project and all of the projects that we have in Ecuador, and having it translate into a reasonable share price, which we're nowhere near yet. So it's our intention, and that's clearly evident from the Franco agreement, to proceed down the path to completing the feasibility study and and developing this project, and we're taking a rather novel approach to both the pre-feasibility and the full feasibility study, in that we're running all of the processes and sub-studies that are required to get to those stages in parallel, so it doesn't take too much time, and so that we can feed data from one stream and conclusions from one stream into the others, and have the whole thing move along in parallel. So yes, we are targeting completion of the pre-feasibility study by the end of September, and the full feasibility study by end of Q1 or Q2 next year in 2021. Yes, COVID has delayed it, but it's reassuring to see that the Ecuadorian government is lifting restrictions on the exploration and mining industry in Ecuador. So everybody's getting working again, and they're opening up the airport again, I believe, on the 13th of June. So we will be able to get Franco in there to show them around the site and the ancillary facilities that we need to have them complete their due diligence. So they've completed all of the stuff that can be done outside of the country, and they've now got to complete site visits.
I mentioned at the top the interest of BHP and Newcrest. What is their intention with their holdings? Are they happy with where they are, or do you see them ultimately potentially as a company that might want to take control of what's happening when all of the pre-feas studies and DFS studies are out in the market? Because clearly, if there is upside surprises, what you're describing potentially from this asset in Ecuador, this is going to become a prize. And still, with Solgold shares trading at what, just 29 pence, this is a company which doesn't really still represent the full potential value of the company. So do you see Newcrest and or BHP as a company that might just be standing in the wings waiting to take over the majority shareholding?
Well, look, I can't speak for Newcrest or BHP. I think it's fairly evident from some of the comments that have been made in the press by Newcrest. BHP haven't made any comments in the press, to their great credit, that they didn't like the Franco deal, and I don't blame them for not liking the Franco deal. They would have preferred us to issue straight cheap equity to fund the project, and that would have been highly dilutive. And from our point of view as a board, wasn't the best option available for shareholders in terms of ascribing well-backed value to the Alpala project. Now, it's important to understand that Solgold is not just about Alpala. Solgold is about building a copper-gold mining industry in Ecuador for the benefit of all Ecuadorians and the benefit of all Solgold shareholders. It's our aim to make Solgold as important to Ecuador as BHP was to the emergence of Australia as a resource powerhouse on a global basis. Ecuador, we believe that that country can become one of the most important copper producers on earth, and we aim to be at the centre of that. If we have 14 other sites through the country at the moment, there's 20 more licenses to be granted under the new cadastre, which will reopen very soon, we believe. And that sets Solgold up as a unique company globally, with not only one tier one project at its disposal, but possibly 14 others. Now, if we only ended up with significant ore bodies in half of those, it would still make Solgold one of the most outstanding copper gold growth stories over the next 5 years in the world. And title is vital. We're hanging on to as much of the equity in our projects as we can. We're determined to be at the centre of the emergence of Ecuador as a copper gold mining nation, and we're determined that Solgold and its shareholders be the focus of that.
What just one final question is about the share price. If we bring up the share price chart, 29 pence here in London. As I said, it's listed as well in the main market in Toronto. What is being priced in at these levels then at 29 pence?
The market cap of the company at 29 pence would be about £570 million, or around about 700 million US dollars. That is still a small fraction of our net present value. I think we're somewhere between concerns about financing fears, sovereign fears, and copper market fears that were 6 months ago quite dominant in our market, and an emerging realization that we are going to finance this project. We're making great strides under the direction and management of our head of corporate and project finance, Ingo Hoffmeyer. Great strides and progress in the area of debt facility generation that is in some cases also linked to the copper and gold production levels. So we don't see funding this project as a problem. It's a banker's dream with a very spiky high cash flow at the front end of the project in the first 15 years. And we think that the realization that we will get it funded, that Ecuador is committed to the development of a mining industry, and certainly the global finance authorities such as the World Bank and the IFC are pushing very hard to persuade and assist Solgold to get that mining industry opened up more freely. And a realization now that once COVID comes off, the copper demand around the world is going to increase very dramatically, and with declining copper production, copper resource grades, increasing cost of production, and declining concentrate quality, a project like Solgold's Alpala project is going to stand out very markedly, and it will quickly become, as it is already becoming, a great focus for some of the world's resource development and resource finance houses.
Okay, Nick, we'll leave it there, but thank you so much indeed for your time running us through details of the project, the main flagship project in Ecuador, the Alpala project. Solgold Chief Executive, Nick Mather. For more videos from us here at IGTV, join us on Twitter at IGTV and subscribe to our YouTube channel.